We can all agree this is an indie game, but it is a AAA or AA game. Well, you could argue that. Hold on, would it be? Because I generally use those letters, the A, AA, AAA, like B level game, like that kind of stuff. To me, I don't think that has anything at all to do with scope, quality, anything like that. It's only budget. This game is what you would think of as AAA quality, like it has AAA production values. It has the kind of presentation that you should only expect from AAA games. You know, like as far as all the detail and the depth of the environment, like there's clearly a lot of people who worked on this game. Larian is about 400 people, which isn't an appreciably smaller studio than something like would work on maybe not Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed games are like kind of ridiculous as far as, but you know what I mean? Like a game of that tier, like a developing studio of around 500 to 1,000 people tends to be what you would think of as a large studio, and anything beyond that, of course, like very large, you could maybe order that there's their own tier. I don't know how to exactly quantify the budget for Baldur's Gate 3 because of how they did it. So, I mean, as far as the funding goes, it is an indie game, absolutely, because they made the game, they put it on Steam, they let it be in early access and said, hey, you can buy the whole game now and you get it for free when it comes out, but just so you know, we are definitely going to just keep making the game for years. Like I played this game 2.5 years ago at this point. Or 2 years ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, dead on. So how do you quantify all of the early access purchases going into the budget of this game? Because if they're reinvesting it in the game itself, which I think it's clear that they did, I don't know how to say what the budget of this game was. I guess you could say the amount of money spent, but that is not necessarily money raised and funded and put behind the game before it was started. Like, we don't know how much the initial cost of this game was. Like when Larian said, okay, we're done Divinity Original Sin 2, what are we doing about funding for our next game, and what is our next game going to be? I know that Wizards of the Coast had nothing to do with it because they paid for the license, as in Larian paid for the Baldur's Gate 3 license. They're not like, this isn't a contract game, it's a license game. It's a bit different. It means that Larian came to them and said, we'll pay you to let us use this, as opposed to Wizards of the Coast saying, hey, can you make a new Baldur's Gate game? We'll pay you to do it, you know? There's still money changing hands. It's just the direction it goes, you know, that matters. Like it is pretty significant, especially as far as how much control Wizards of the Coast had over what exactly they do. Like they might say, hey, if you have a scene with the druid, make sure it's not in bear form. And they're like, we're doing it in bear form. People have to deal with it. It'll cause a big meme and make a lot of people not understand what this game is for a good stretch of time. It's a very large scale indie game, but I actually don't think the letter system really applies to it because it's effectively a crowdfunded game. It is. You know, like, I mean, that Steam Early Access is, I think, a very viable and useful form of crowdfunding for video games. Because if you've got a version of your game, or a shareware version, if you will, like Knee Deep in the Dead being the Doom shareware episode that most people played for $5 at the local gas station. Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3 was that. It was like, yeah, you play the hell out of Act 1. You can see all the things we're adding. You can play as different character classes and different races and see how the differences manifest. I didn't do that. I just played it once and was like, yeah, okay, cool. I'll make a video on this for Geeks and Gamers, and I can't wait to play it in 1.0. And you can do that too. Or you can turn yourself into like one of the devs' right-hand men, like boots on the ground, just trying to figure all the bugs and then send it to them. And you might end up with a job if you do that enough, depending on the studio and what their hiring's like. But I think that the idea that video games need to have $500 million budgets, $400 million marketing budgets on top of that, and be worked on by 6 different studios, all kind of making the same game, but different parts of the same game. So it's like building a Lego structure, but different people are deciding which parts are going to be used for the structure and then just handing it to you. And you had to be like, oh, wait, I was building something kind of different. They're like, make it work. And you're like, click. That looks like, but here you go, other team. Then the other team's like, whoa, none of these parts fit with anything we made. It's like, no, put them together. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of that going on in the gaming industry, it seems, like in the production end of AAA. Because if you just look at all the support studios that are on some of these big games, it's insane. There's like 7 studios making each game. Where's this? How did these guys do it with one studio? One studio, 6 years, no massive publisher behind you. They have some funding from Tencent, because I believe Tencent owns 30% of them. But I don't believe there was any massive cash infusion from the Chinese mega conglomerate to make the Dungeons and Dragons game that the top-down RPG people made. I could be wrong, but I feel like that bear scene is not super down with the kind of things the CCP wants like people seeing. So I don't know that I'd be like, yeah, they got that China money. It's like, well, maybe they got a little, but I mean, isn't it just like they own stock effectively? But I mean, 30% is a fair chunk, so there is that as well. There's a lot that many studios can learn from Baldur's Gate 3, I believe. I honestly think the biggest thing is just, you know, take the time to make the game right. And hey, if you're going to release a broken, unfinished version, tell us that's what you're doing so that we know what we're paying for. And then when the 1.0 version comes out, they can be like, yeah, okay, the game's actually out here and all the rest of the content's in, you're good to go. And then I jumped in after 2 years of having not played it and was like, oh man, this game got way better. And that was cool. I mean, I guess the worry is that a lot of people will say, oh, okay, but this is... if we do that, this is definitely going to not be great for like optics, because people see people will see the most rough version of our game, the most rough, unfinished early version of our game. So we don't want them to play that. We just want them to show a trailer that makes them think our game's actually going to be way better than it's going to be. And oh, then you release a super polished product and blow everyone away. Yeah, no, we're just going to still release the broken one, but in a year. It's like, oh, is that better? I don't know, man. I think if you've got an unfinished game and you need to sell it, otherwise you're going to start losing copious amounts of money on it, you should probably just say early access. You know? Like, and then seemed to work out pretty well for this game. I played it. I bought it in early access and thought it was so good and wanted to play it on my Steam Deck, which I've not even done once, by the way. So I bought it again on Steam. I just bought 2 copies of this game because I thought it was that good. Not the best use of my money, to be honest, especially when I realized I wouldn't be. I realized that this game is so unbelievably cinematic and fun to play through on streams that I kind of just decided, okay, I'm just going to play this whole game on stream then. I'm not really going to be playing it on my Steam Deck like at all. I haven't even fired it up. So that was a waste of money. However, I'm saying that I'm not upset that I spent it because I helped fund a really good game. And I'd do it again. You know, if Larian said, okay, we're doing Icewind Dale 2 next. Or, you know what? We're doing a Cyberpunk 2020 game. We're going to do a prequel to Cyberpunk 2077 that is an actual tabletop role-playing simulator. And I think, honestly, I think CD Projekt Red would be like... oh god, what if it's really good? They're like, oh man, please say that the Cyberpunk audience doesn't click with it, otherwise they might be like, oh, we should have just done that to begin with. We should have made it a first-person shooter. But I'm not, again, I like Cyberpunk more than most people do, but I think that something like that would be really cool. And if they said, yeah, Cyberpunk 2020 by Larian is early access now, I'd be like, yeah, day one. Day one I'm in. I just want to even see what you do with the combat. Let me do one battle and then I'll play it in 4 years. Honestly, because I just think back reading video game magazines and stuff when I was a kid and when we first started getting video game websites, but honestly further back than that, more in the Electronic Gaming Monthly, PC Gamer kind of days. Like PC Gamer the magazine, not I guess I was playing on PC, but generally I would get EGM to read about all the different types of video games. I would get like 1 or 2 console games a year, usually at my birthday or Christmas, but I could actually get a fair amount of things to play on my PC if I got PC Gamer, so because it came with a demo disc every month. So a lot of what I was playing was, I mean, it might have been what got me into so many like weird little PC games, is I would play just random PC game demos that would come in a magazine. And it was before you had like PlayStation Magazine that kind of started doing the same thing. But in those days, I would like I would always be like, oh man, I wish I could just play the demo of this that these people are talking about, because there'd be things like, hey, we just played Wing Commander 4, and the I don't know, the flight mechanics in it have gotten significantly better. The ships no longer look like totally flat polygons, and there's all sorts of improvements. And I'd always be like, man, I wish I could fire this thing up for 5 minutes. Like, I just want to kind of see what he's talking about, because I'm seeing pictures and I'm like, I can imagine, I suppose, but what's this gonna look like on my PC, like playing it with my little joystick thing that was like a flight stick at the time. I had little suction cups on it. It wasn't very good, but I would use it to play games like Rebel Assault and stuff. So, and Wing Commander. The early access model, I think, is something that the industry should. That I think is probably the lesson that the industry should learn from Baldur's Gate 3. It's tell people you're releasing something that is unfinished and is just an experiment really right now, and it might not even ever come out, or you probably should guarantee that it does come out, but it might not come out and be the thing that we're saying it's going to be now, because it will probably shift through development. But if you want to take the risk and be with us on this journey and fiddle around with it as we're developing on it, play all the new builds, we'll be constantly updating it and adding things to it, and you can tell us your feedback all the entire way through development. I know people who would do that for Battlefield or Call of Duty, or like, I mean, for all the kind of normie games that have been launched and sort of broken or off. I mean, I guess Call of Duty tends to be pretty polished, though I haven't played one in 3 years now. Last one I played was Cold War, so I missed the last few. Because all right, Modern Warfare 2, Vanguard, and then Modern Warfare 3 is coming out a year after 2, so I'm sure they worked on it really hard. I know people that would do that, you know, like they'd say, hey, yeah, for example, I would absolutely play a new id Software game coming out, or Cyberpunk. I'd help CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk. I'd be like, oh yeah, here's some things that I like that you're doing here. Here's what you could be doing better. I would give them detailed notes, actually, because I'd be like, you guys actually could use some pointers. And not pointers like here's how you do it, but more here's how you make decisions that won't make you have to deal with those things that you now need to solve. Like that. That's more the level I can help on. I'd be like, no, just do not do this, and you will save yourself a ton of headache. For example, I would be like, hey, if we can't get the police system running well, I'd be like, okay, work on that, or remove crime from the game as a factor. Like, have it be the kind of game where you just, if you shoot someone or hit someone accidentally, someone just says, oh my God, you killed that guy. And then they never address it. There's no cops. There's nothing like that. It's like, oh, we're making an immersive game. It's like, yeah, but you can't get this working. So the better idea, take it right out. Let's be like, this is a lawless cyberpunk dystopia. Boom. Like, it's decisions often that makes it so that these things are going as poorly as they are. And I think that if there are more games that are released into early access and giving a wider breadth of people who are giving them feedback throughout the course of development and saying, hey, here's what's working well, here's what's working not so well. And yeah, you'll have some contradictions because some people might like certain aspects that others don't, which is why, you know, you're the developers. You guys still make the final call at all points. And all developers in the early access system can be like, okay, yeah, all this feedback, you guys, we don't care. We're making this game this way, and then release it. And hey, maybe you're a genius developer and that'll work. But I think that for a lot of studios, especially studios that are learning, I think early access is a great way to be like, hey, let's see if we can make a game of this scale. Even though Larian's been making CRPGs since like the early 90s, I think Divine Divinity was the first one, and or something like that. It was a very long time ago, though. I didn't even realize that they're as old as they were. I thought they just kind of made the original Sin games and that was it. But no, apparently all Divinity is theirs. Hey, they did it that way, making a game where they had years worth of feedback that they were constantly iterating on over time until they got to a game that was actually really solid.